Hello, welcome to Chapter 12. This is the last chapter we're covering in by 231. It's the first of many chapters that cover various parts of the nervous system. So this is just the very beginning of, I think, about 5 chapters total that cover their nervous system. My cat's kind of going crazy this morning, so hopefully she'll behave herself. So this is just the introduction of the nervous system mini lesson. I'm just going to go over the organization, which will cover, again, these 5 chapters, which will start at the very end of 231, and we'll pick up when we come back to start 232. So when we take a look at how the nervous system is organized, we can kind of see it's a pretty complex flow chart. So first of all, what I wanted to talk about is the physical parts of the nervous system. So that is the brain, the spinal cord, and the peripheral nerves. So those are the 3 major parts. The brain and spinal cord make up what we call the central nervous system, or CNS. And then your peripheral nerves, those are your sensory receptors, your motor neurons, and everything in between that's not your brain and spinal cord, that makes up the peripheral nervous system, or PNS. So we have whole chapters over the brain and spinal cord we'll cover in 232, and we have specific chapters on different components of the autonomic nervous system, sensory and motor, and that's all coming in 232. What we're going to focus on in 231 is just the function of neurons, which are found in all of these component parts of the nervous system. But I do want to break down kind of the flow of information within the spinal cord. So we usually start with information coming in via a receptor. So when we talk about receptors, this sensory information, and this is what we call the afferent division. We're going to see this word a lot. Afferent means coming into or coming towards something. So when we take in sensory information, that's part of our afferent division of the peripheral nervous system, because that information is being picked up by sensory receptors. Now, we learn a few of those back in the integumentary system. If you remember, the lamellated corpuscle, the tactile corpuscle, the free nerve endings, the hair follicles were innervated. So that is picking up sensory information. Of the types of sensory information that can be picked up, we have our special senses. So those are modified sensory receptors to pick up very specific type of information, like your eyes is a special sense. Your ears, hearing, and equilibrium are special senses. Taste and smell are special senses. So those are all part of our special senses division of the afferent nervous system. And then we have what are called visceral sensory receptors. These monitor sensations that you are not consciously aware of. So this would be like your blood's pH, or the oxygen level in your blood, or your blood pressure, or different characteristics of other organs and their homeostasis. So they're sensations that are going on in your body that you have no idea. You cannot consciously comprehend them because they don't send their signals to that part of your brain, but they are picking up really important information that your brain and central nervous system process, but it's just all outside of your conscious understanding. And then lastly, we have somatic sensory receptors. So somatic is referring to conscious awareness. So anything that you are consciously aware of is being picked up by somatic sensory receptors. So those are going to be monitoring touch and pain and pressure, stretches of your skeletal muscles and joints and things like that. So visceral is unconscious. Somatic is conscious. So again, we're going to see those words a lot as well. So with all of that information coming in, all parts of these are heading towards the central nervous system, brain and spinal cord. Then that sensory information is processed, either at the spinal cord level or at the brain level, either one of those. There's lots of integration going on. And then that's going to take that information, and your processing centers are going to then send out commands via the efferent division. Efferent means going away from, going towards the effector, right? So we learned that word back in homeostasis in chapter 1. So sensory information comes in via the afferent division, gets integrated and processed at your central nervous system, and then gets sent out via the efferent nervous system via these motor neurons. Okay, there's two major divisions within the efferent division, right? So we had three types of receptors: special senses, visceral, and somatic. And now we're going to have quite a bit more different organizations of our efferent division. So probably the easiest one, I'm just going to block off here in green, is our somatic nervous system. This is what we were dealing with in Chapter 10 with the control of our skeletal muscles. Again, there's that word somatic. Somatic means conscious control, conscious awareness for somatic sensory, conscious control for somatic motor. So this is what you think and move. You have control of your only effector, skeletal muscles. That's the only thing that you have conscious control over besides your I was going to say your emotions, but you don't really have conscious control over those either. But your thinking and your processing and things like that, like how you're going to think, that's under your control. But as far as an effector goes, to actually do something, you really only have skeletal muscles at your command. Everything else falls under what we call the autonomic nervous system. So I'm going to put that in the purple box here. So autonomic nervous system is everything that's outside of your conscious control. So autonomic and visceral are kind of interchangeable. The words kind of mean outside of conscious control. So within that division, the autonomic nervous system, we have two ways that we're going to control our effectors. And our effectors are in this box here: smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, glands, and they mention adipose tissue, but I'm really concerned about smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, glands. We don't have control over those things. We can't consciously control smooth muscle. We can't consciously control cardiac muscle. We can't consciously control when our glands are going to secrete. So all of that has to be done outside of our conscious control, and that's all regulated and carried out by the autonomic nervous system. There's two ways that those effectors can be stimulated. One is via what we call the parasympathetic division. A good mnemonic that I use for the parasympathetic division is what we call rest and digest. So anything that's active during the times of rest or after you've eaten, that's how these effectors are going to be stimulated. So for example, after you've just eaten, the smooth muscle around your digestive tract is going to be quite active, but your respiratory rate's going to be lower. Your heart rate's going to be lower. When you're sleeping, all of those activities are going to be lower. So that is dominated by what we call the parasympathetic division. The other way that these effectors can be stimulated is called the sympathetic division or sympathetic activation. So they communicate to mostly the same effectors, so smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, glands, and some adipose tissue, but they do it mostly opposite. I was going to say completely opposite, but not always. So the sympathetic division, the mnemonic or the rhyme that I like to use for that one is your fight or flight. So most people have heard that before. So your fight or flight, this is when you are not resting and digesting. It's usually a crisis or emergency situation. So your smooth muscle is going to, depending on which smooth muscle you're talking about, if it's your smooth muscle of your digestive system, that's probably going to slow down because you don't need to be actively doing digestive processes if you're in an emergency and you have to run away from a lion or whatever. Your cardiac muscle is going to be working faster because your heart rate's going to go up, your respiratory rate's going to go up, your blood volume and blood pressure, all your circulatory systems going to be more active, while your digestive and urinary systems are going to be less active. So these two divisions, this parasympathetic and the sympathetic, work together to control your autonomic effectors: smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and glands. We have a whole chapter focused on the autonomic nervous system we'll cover in 232 in the next term. All right, so that's just what I wanted to cover in this introduction, the organization of the nervous system. It's kind of the path that we're heading into after we get done with Chapter 12. When we come back in 232 with Chapter 13, that's the start of the rest of this organization of the nervous system. Okay, so I will see you next time. Bye.